But today we have very few who are determined to follow the letter of the law. And yet everybody in Washington takes that oath. They take the oath to obey the Constitution. But just think, if we restricted adherence to the Constitution, would the federal government be involved in education? We don't need the Department of Education. It's our Constitution. Departments that I would like to get rid of rather rapidly as fast as we can. But if we don't do this, our economic problems are going to get much worse. Our civil liberties are going to continue to deteriorate. So, other than getting rid of the 5 departments and going back to the 06 budget line, I do want to immediately, in the first year, cut $1 trillion out of the budget. If you're interested in making comparisons, I think you know what the current administration will do. I think they've just given us a budget that didn't go down. But look at the other Republican candidates. Are they offering any cuts? No. But they'll say they are. They're saying, well, we're, even some of the budget proposals that came out of the stalemate in the Congress and then the stalemate and the confusion with the super committee, and then the automatic cuts, they're talking about $1 trillion of cuts. They aren't cuts. They're cuts of the proposed increases. They're planning in this line item budgeting. We're supposed to be able to spend $10 trillion of new money over the next 10 years. So they're going to cut $1 trillion out of these proposed increases, and they call that cuts. Now, if you cut $1 trillion over 10 years, that's $100 billion a year. Our national debt is going up $100 billion every month. I mean, that's how far removed they are from reality. So, one thing I say is the American people are waking up. They realize how bad things are. They're trying to speak out and trying to get the attention of Washington. But I tell you what, the people I know there, except for very few, they don't have any idea the seriousness of this problem that we have. They think that we are somehow going to be protected because we still have the reserve currency of the world and they're still taking our dollars. But if it were true that we could keep spending money, running up $1 trillion a year debt, or $1.5 trillion, and we print the money that we need, if that were true, guess what? None of us would ever have to work again. All we do is print money and let the foreigners work for us, and we just spend our money. Everybody knows that's not true. So reality will set in, and there is no reason in the world to think that we are not immune from the kind of conditions that are existing in Greece today. And that's what we have to live up to and believe, that we have to get down to the basics and say we have to cut, we have to balance our budget, we have to have sound money, we have to restore the Constitution. But since 100 years ago, our freedoms didn't disappear overnight. Matter of fact, the disintegration of the currency didn't occur immediately. Between 1930 and 1971, there was steady depreciation and deterioration of the value of our currency. But in 1971, when the last link to gold was severed, we have since that time lost 85% of the 1971 dollar. Since 1913, since the Fed was created to protect the value of our money, we've lost 98% of the value of a 1913 dollar. And they consider that success. Well, they've gotten away with that for a long time. They were always giving credit, the Fed was given the credit for creating the booms. And everybody likes the boom periods, but if they understand economics and Austrian free market economics, you have to realize for every boom there's a bust. And we have been having those constantly. But up until now, the Fed always got credit for getting us out of the bust. They would just print more money, and it seemed to work. Governments would spend more money, print more money, and the confidence was there enough. We just accumulated more and more debt. Now we're up against the wall. We can't just keep accumulating more debt. Our credit rating has gone down once, it's going to go down again, and we're on the road to a real economic catastrophe as long as we continue to do this. So it is up to the current generation. You know, I used to talk a lot, and people still do talk about, you know, we have to quit doing this and running up this debt, or we'll pass it on to the next generation. Guess what? We are the next generation, and we have to deal with the debt and the crisis that we have.
Do it now!
The one thing that we can't do is nibble away and tinker with the budget and not change a philosophy. This is why the revolution that's going on now is a idealistic, it's a theoretical revolution and a change on what government should do. The founders had a very clear understanding of what government should do. And the government was not to be very complicated. The Constitution is not that complicated. You know, nobody in Congress can read those bills and understand them, but most Americans can read the Constitution and understand the Constitution. Asked the questions when they were living under the oppression of the king. They said it's too much government, too much abuse of our civil liberties, too many military officers marching into our houses, and they didn't like the role of the king, and they did not like it. Now, the founders were very well educated. They were educated in the classics, they were educated in biblical history, and they knew that the type of government that they had was not the kind they wanted. So they asked the question, what should the role of government be? And their answer simply was, a true republic, the role of government is to defend liberty. Right. It's not to run the economy, it's not to run your personal life, and it's certainly not to police the world.
Yeah!
But somewhere along the way, systematically, these concepts were undermined, and the concept of liberty was divided up into pieces. Instead of seeing liberty as an individual issue where you have the right to your life and you have a right to your money, you have the right to run your social and religious life outside of what the government says, and also your economic life. But over the last 50 years, there's been one group that, you know, sort of defends economic liberty, and another group sort of defends civil liberties. But it's all one and the same. We had come to think that because we got off on a tangent in our early history, because certain groups were punished. You know, they had less liberties than others. There's still a little bit of that. Is it working? How about that?
President Paul!
How are we doing now? Are we back again? No.
We'll listen carefully.
How about now? Am I back on? Before you knew it, we would have had a conspiracy worked out real fast. Now let me see, where was I? I was talking about liberty, I'm sure of that. Economic liberty and social liberty is one and the same because we get our rights as individuals, and our rights come from our Creator. In our early history, we did have abuse of groups because we saw people as part of a group. And that is wrong. There's still some of that going on. I think there's abuse in our judicial system because when you see the enforcement of drug laws and a few other things, certain groups are punished much more so than other groups. So we are far from a perfect delivering of justice in this country. But we've drifted away from, you know, a real abuse in a collective sense. But just because we know that we're not supposed to punish people because they belong to a group, but we're not supposed to give privileges to groups because they belong to a group. The answer to that is seeing every one of us as an individual. We shouldn't have hyphenated rights. We shouldn't have special privileges because we belong to a group. It can't be by gender or by race or anything else. But nobody can be punished and nobody gets benefits. Everybody gets equal protection under the law, and that's what would happen in a true republic. The attack in Washington, D.C. is an attack on civil liberties, but the tragedy there is it's an attack on all Americans, what's going on right now. It is an attack in a narrow sense in one group, but what is happening, I think, is very, very serious. And we just had, it's about a year ago, I think it was in February last year, the administration sent a representative to the Senate, and he testified that they changed their policy. Unilaterally, the executive branch changed the policy, and the president declared that he had the authority to assassinate American citizens. And he proved his point. He's done it on 3 occasions, including one 16-year-old boy that was out barbecuing to make his point. But this whole idea that because somebody seems to be a bad person, is no justification of the worse the person is, the more necessary it is to make sure that they get justice, to make sure that we always have justice in the court system. You know, if the Nazi war criminals had a trial, and Timothy McVeigh had a trial, and Adolf Eichmann had a trial after many years in Israel, there's no reason for us to assume that this president, or any president, has this type of authority. This is embarking on a fact that we should not permit. The president declared this unilaterally, and his justification is, and this is his interpretation of the Constitution. He says, if it's not prohibited in the Constitution, I can do anything I want. And there's a lot of people who have been taught that in our schools. I mean, this comes from the far left, but some on the right who don't understand it as well either. But that's not the way the Constitution is written. It's written, thou shalt not do anything unless you have the explicit authority to do it. The Congress has participated, assuming the same thing. And last year, just so recently, and this unfortunately, even in the House, where we have control in the House, they agree with the president sometimes on the wrong things. And some of these attacks on civil liberties and some of these wars we're fighting, we have the right, the conservatives, on the side of the president. So what did the Congress do? You know, just in December, a bill was signed January 1st by the president. He said that posse comitatus no longer exists under the National Defense Authorization Act. He claims that the U.S. military has the proper authority to arrest any Americans that they want to. And they can do this and deny a lawyer, put in a prison secretly, and held indefinitely, and no trial whatsoever. That is not... Can you imagine what the founders would think? That we did this, we passed the law, and said nothing? The one thing that I know, a lot of Americans are willing to say something when they hear about this. Matter of fact, I have been so impressed the last 2 months by just bringing this subject up. Just say National Defense Authorization Act. And everybody knows the bad parts of the National Defense Authorization Act. So the American people have heard about this, and I can be quite certain you didn't hear it on national evening news. civil liberties have been bad for the last 10 years. I recall very much, as every one of us did, on 9/11. It was a disastrous day for us. There's been a lot of confusion on explaining it and some disagreement. But I'll tell you one thing, my conclusion is that we were not attacked because we were free and prosperous. There were other reasons involved.